Inspired Evolution. And it is, oh my God, dude, seriously, are y'all tuned in? Y'all are tuned in. It is such a treat to be here today. I have with me a very dear, a very special sister in Molly Cofman. Molly, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you? Even better now.
The blast waves of sound all the way from Australia. Yo, because where are you right now? You're in Italy, right?
I'm in Tuscany, yeah. I'm in Tuscany.
Sounds horrible. Well, we're going to find out all about your adventures and all about your vagabonding ways. I'm going to put it that way. But let me quickly, for those tuning in to Molly for the first time, bring you up to some sort of speed when really Molly's speed is very chilled. It's going to be very flown. Can't wait for this conversation. So she founded Inspiration Heals, right? So this word inspiration, we're definitely bonded on really deeply. Inspiration Heals brings traditional Chinese medicine, modern medicine, yoga, movement, and other inspirations, right, together for a healthier, more joyful, vibrant, and compassionate life. Inspiration Heals is dedicated to inspiring and connecting people. I love that. And creating unique experiences in which you can learn to feel comfortable in your own skin, learn to express yourself freely, and heal the habits and dis-eases that stand in your way. Sister, it is such a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, it's really a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, my brother. Thank you.
So tuning in, so vagabonding, I'm dead set serious about this because we met on retreat in Brazil. So we were both doing our vagabonding thing, and we chanced across, oh, Molly, hey, how's it going? And it was just this really beautiful encounter. But now you're in Italy. And you also, I know in your horizon, there's retreats coming up in Patagonia. So, let's talk about your curiosity for an adventure and where did that really start in your life?
Oh, my goodness. Well, maybe a nice place to start actually is where Inspiration Heals comes from. And it actually, Inspiration Heals is something that started for me way back when I was in graduate school. So my interest in healing has been really since I was born. I always dreamed of being a doctor, a medicine woman, but my dream was to live in a small town, to carry a little black bag, to, be the old fashioned kind of doctor that's treating generations and walking from house to house. I have no idea where this dream came from. But I'm a far stretch from that now, but in a way, I suppose doing the same thing. And so I went through the rigmarole of studying biology, went to university. And when I graduated university, I went into a research job in genetic research, working on the Human Genome Project, actually, which you don't hear a lot about anymore these days, while I was applying to medical schools. And in that time, which seems like a few lifetimes ago, for me, it was really necessary to be a volunteer in a hospital too. And I come from a family of attorneys, actually, so I'm completely black sheep vagabond in that way. Now, in my connection genetically, I have no idea what happened there. Born upside down into my family. But, what happened little by little over time is that I was really encompassed by the Western medical world and every day falling out of love with what I was seeing as far as the approach to healing, as far as how the doctors were carrying themselves and interacting with patients. And so I arrived in a place where actually I was just completely lost because my whole life had been medical school, be a doctor, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden I'm immersed in this world where I felt literally like a fish out of water. Yeah. And so one of my personal therapies my whole life has been music and dance. And I reached out to a professor at the University of Arizona in Tucson in the United States where I had done my undergraduate work. I said, I think that I'd like to come back and do a Master of Fine Arts in dance and explore dance as a healing art because I'm not finding my way in traditional medicine. So let me reach back out to something that's familiar, that has always been healing for me and, and see what's there. So,
and was there a lot in that space when you were picking your curiosities to moving, picking your feet towards this curiosity?
Well, I mean, there was so much in that space, right? Because for me, dance is something that moves me beyond words. And it's so much of what I'm trying to create for people now in my projects, in my travels, in my adventures, is that I mean, here you and I are connected on social media. We're doing a podcast. There's no doubt that technology and words and articulation is an important way of connection. But when when you do I can't even pretend to do it, right? Like something in my heart stops and I breathe in, and there is this sensation of excitement and inspiration and connection that cannot be described in words, right? And so this is the place where I believe that wisdom really can be found. And, the key, I guess, in all of it is that we have to bring it back into the world. We have to find a way to articulate it, to put words to it. But in that space, when I was making that decision, really what I was doing, and I didn't know it consciously in that moment, was I was bringing myself back to a place, tapping into the wisdom beyond words, tapping into, right, this reconnection with the totality of humanity rather than just the sort of mechanism that I was seeing in Western healing, if that makes sense.
It does. And so this whole concept of dance, is it because you kind of see the whole narrative as one big dance? Is that what you're alluding to in that?
Well, I mean, certainly, yes, I do. And the thing is that sometimes when you say dance, people's immediate reaction is, I can't dance. I don't have feelings. Right. Yeah. So I think that's nice
very common. It's like, you can't sing either. It's like, don't sing. But you talk, but you don't sing. No. Okay. But the sound's coming out of your mouth.
That,
yes.
The
but you don't sing. No.
Right. I think all the funny moves that are discoordinated. So I suppose it's probably nice to say, like this concept of dance again is for me, the vehicle is dance and music. For other people, the vehicle is writing. For other people, the vehicle is being in nature. But what I'm getting at when I think about this concept of dance is complete integration of body, spirit, mind, inspiration, and direction in life. So this kind of dance. Yes, I love to use my body, and you told me not to talk with my hands, but not my hands. Because
I tried to glad wrap her hands together, but I couldn't do it. She was too far away, so forgive me.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, for sure, I see life as a dance. Because the moments that I feel the best, the moments, now I'm leading these retreats all over the world and watching people's evolution through these experiences is like watching them learn how to dance, literally, as they sort of piece themselves back together from being the Picasso painting that often modern life leaves us as, an eyeball here and an ear there, and not that there's not beauty to that, but when we feel integrated, when we feel the music of us flowing without interruption, then life is a dance for sure.
Cool. There is two really deep things I want to speak to there, and I guess I'm going to speak to the more nebulous one first, right? So a lot of what you're talking about is integrating all that spirit, all that emotion, we're at least activated on 4 to 5 dimensions, right? So that physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, and now I also discuss financial because it deserves to be honored and respected just as much as the others, right? So that creative expression is what you're talking to in terms of integrating that. Why creativity? Do you know what I mean? A lot of people, and I know I was having this conversation with someone recently, is that, it was quite surprising. I was doing a podcast live in front of an audience, and the question went up, who thinks they're not creative? And people put their hands up. And obviously someone such as yourself and myself will be doing a lot of work on ourselves and creatively creating retreats. But then even just the fact that this person was, if I recall correctly, she was an occupational therapist. And it was like, hey, she was like, I don't feel like I'm creative. And it's like, but you chose to put that T-shirt with those pair of pants today, you chose to set up a whole career that you mapped into, like turning yourself into a therapist. Like you created that, right? Can you see that? And I was like, actually, yeah, I can see that. And it was a real breakthrough moment for her. But, like why creativity? What does it mean to you? And, I think you're articulating that it's really powerful for integration, but tell us.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love this. And I'll say that as I was just listening to those 30 seconds of your beautiful words, right? There's even, for me, a slight difference between creation and creativity. And for me, I think that the foundation of creativity, and it's also something that I am really striving to facilitate for people, is just the simplicity of perspective, of seeing life from different perspectives, right? I feel like there is this thing going on in the modern world, and not to say that things don't have to be big and grand and all encompassing, but I feel like where people get stuck, right, is, are you a creative person? Well, no, I haven't created anything. Well, like you said, you created your outfit, you created your hairdo, you're creating every word that comes out of your mouth, right? So it doesn't have to be this grandiose thing. And I think that we lose sight of this a little bit along the way. And actually, it's a beautiful tie-in. And I know we kind of abandoned the story, but the next step for me in the evolution of Inspiration Heals, and I'll come back to creativity in just a second, was I went back to the University of Arizona. I did my Master of Fine Arts in Theater Arts. And during that time, a friend of mine was rendered quadriplegic in an accident. And so actually my thesis concert became a benefit for this individual, because I was really inspired by, so my vehicle is dance. My vehicle is my physical body. I use it as a tool. I use it as an exploration. I use it. And now here is this friend who did the same thing, who now can't move. So what does movement mean to him? How can we gather around? How can I create movement, right? And this, now I'm talking in the choreographic realm, that reflects how we can see this thing that we've already decided we understand what it is in a completely different way. And this is how actually Inspiration Heals was born, because I titled my concert Inspiration Heals, but at that point it was HEELS, because it was a dance concert.
That's cheeky.
And then, of course, it's gone through many other incarnations. But the thing of creativity for me, and I mean, I get stuck a lot, honestly, in my own life, because I want to create, I want to gather people together. I want to do dance flash mobs in every city. I want, I do have these delusions of grandeur, but every step of the way, what I'm reminded of every day when I wake up is, you know what? The creativity is just born of an open mind, and an open mind for me. And this for me is facilitated really deeply by my yoga practice, by my meditative practices, is it is being able to see any given situation from an infinite number of perspectives. And the key there is that we choose which perspective we want to walk, right? If we stay in the space of just complete and utter possibility, then we never really go anywhere. So I have to choose, okay, today I put on a red sweater and I put on my lucky white shawl just because I was a little nervous about doing my first podcast, but
welcome.
Right. So this is my perspective, but in the back of my mind, what I try to hold open is that I could have done a black sweater. I could have done, I could have done a lot of other things. I'm confident in this choice because it's the path I'm walking, but I'm not blind to that there are so many other ways that it could be going. And this to me is really the seedling of this idea of creativity, is knowing that at any junction, I can say, I chose that yesterday and I still really like it, but I see that there are other options. And today I think I'm going to choose this because maybe it serves me better. Maybe my environment has changed a little bit. Maybe the people I will be around are going to influence me in a different way. And so this idea of creativity, I like to try to facilitate and foster, I suppose, on a more simple level. And of course, that simple level is like planting a seed in the spring, right? You have no idea. Maybe it's going to turn into a 1,000-year-old olive tree. I was just picking olives. It's like the most amazing experience ever, just by the way.
Just sounds a tiny bit romantic. I'm just in Tuscany picking olives.
Romantic,
Just casually. is what I do on my Mondays. Just a lazy Monday.
Right. So creativity for me really is just this. It's having the confidence to walk your walk, but not closing any door to possibility. So that in any given moment, as life shifts around us, we have the possibility to say, oh, you know what? And it's actually something that I've really had to learn how to do guiding these retreats, because I create these experiences for people. And of course, I have an idea of how I'd like for it to go. But then 16 people arrive and actually they write the story, right? Yeah. If I'm stuck in what I think it should be, then we never go anywhere.
Yeah.
And so entering into relationship with these people that arrive to, yes, of course, I've set the structure. Yes, of course, I've set a pervasive intention, I suppose, for the experience. But in all of the moments that arrive, and I was just writing this in an email, for example, last year I took a group to Nepal. And we trekked for 6 days in the Himalaya. And we got on a bus for what was supposed to be a 7-hour bus ride. And the structure of these days is that we do a mindfulness practice in the morning and a yoga practice, mindfulness practice in the evening every day on these adventures as a structural point. And so we're on this bus and we get stuck in traffic. And a 7-hour bus ride turned into an 11-hour bus ride.
Nice.
So,
especially in Nepal and those great roads.
Minus the pee emergencies that we had, right? Everyone started at a certain point. They were like, well, Molly, are we still going to do our evening practice? Molly, are we still, and I'm thinking, well, we're not getting home until 10:30 at night. There's no, And so I stood up and I said, okay, everybody inhale. Lift your arms. And we did an hour of bus yoga. Why not? I mean, I could have been stuck in the fact that we just weren't going to make it to the practice. But in that moment, I was like, you know what? What the heck? Who says yoga has to be on a mat? Let's just do it on the bus. And we had a blast.
So this speaks really potently to what you were saying. And just flagging one thing that you shared in there before I actually ask my next question was, this is something that, like, running retreats, hosting events here in Melbourne, and actually I'm off to India to run a retreat now. It's just consistently, I always maintain, like, people are like, oh, thank you so much, you created something. It's like, at no point was this a creation. Like, this is always a co-creation, like, at all points. Because, like, the reality is, from a very, like, fundamental, like, really fundamental, really mundane, really gross level, right?
Yeah.
You contributed the finances for us to put this together. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is a co-creation. And like, the sooner, like, we can get through that, because then there's none of this projection stuff. It's just like, dude, we're all in this together. It's a complete co-creation. It's such a yummy, yummy space. And I really honor and love the way you shared that.
And Amrit, this is another thing that over the time, I feel like somehow hosting and leading these retreats, I get to witness a heck of a lot of humanity. And what your comment just inspired in me is the fact that nothing in life exists out of relationship. Nothing. I mean, we're even, down to the fact that we are in relationship with our thoughts in every moment. It's not like we're ever isolated, because we aren't. And it's, when I teach teacher trainings and I teach yoga philosophy and I teach even Buddhist philosophy, we talk about the origin of life being the coming together of two entities. And I know, this is a broad Pandora's box, depending on
I love Pandora's boxes.
Is what your philosophy, but every tradition that I've studied so far in this short life that I've lived has some story of origin of life, whether it's, in yoga, we talk about it as the arrival of vibration, and then these first two tendencies of vibration coming together to create the next thing. But the very foundation of life is relationship. And we tend toward suffering when we forget this. And I feel like in the modern world, everyone is searching to feel connected, but we don't know how to do that. And so what we do is we isolate ourselves, and we feel like we're isolated, but we're actually never isolated, because there's nothing that can be out of relationship.
It's interesting, that really, isn't it? Because, like, even anxiety, depression, I just got my mental health first aid, by the way. So this is, like, very present for me at the moment. But now they've started calling them, thank you, diseases of disconnection. So they're legitimately called diseases of loneliness, right? So things that are stemming from disconnect. And so even, like, on a very scientific level, like, even the labs in the white coats have identified that it's disconnection, right? It's not just like a hippie thing. And even when I say hippie, I know it sounds derogatory, but I really mean that in, like, a really earthen kind of way, right? But there is this whole essence of, like, I agree with what you're saying, is that everything is in relationship, like even inspiration, like the word means so much to us, and we're in this symbiosis with trees. There's a great argument that we could make that trees are actually cultivating humans, not the other way around, you know?
Yes,
But in that, like everything is consistently in that dance, but at the same time, not every relationship is as rewarding or as serving as others, it would seem, because people are feeling disconnect, right?
Absolutely. And this really comes back to, in some ways, creativity. And it seems like a far stretch, but creativity really is born of a place of presence, right? If you think about sitting in a place where you feel comfortable in a choice that you've made, you're remaining aware that there are an infinite number of other choices you could have made, but you're fine, right? That place of integration is really a place of presence. And in traditional, he's taking notes. For the audience, I'm watching Amrit's blue pen go every once in a while, and then another good question. Yeah, but there's, and it's another sort of foundational thing about life, and that is that life is movement. And part of how movement manifests for human beings is that we do have this freedom of choice. And if we think of ourselves, and I know this is a little bit out there, and we haven't really given the foundation in the conversation for this, but
let it ride.
Tradition, let it ride. In the foundation of the yogic tradition, in Buddhism, Taoism, all of these nature-based philosophies, right? The very foundation of life is vibration. And each entity that exists in life is a unique symphony of vibrations. And it's just like, if you think about music, for example, I'm sorry to admit it, I love country music. I love blues. I love jazz. Rap, not so much, right? It's a vibration that I don't really like, it just doesn't flow through my body. Not that I don't appreciate the message of what a rapper might be saying, not that, right? But like the actual vibration of the entity, it just doesn't feel good to me. So do I lament that I can't make this thing be good for me? Or do I say, when I have the choice, I listen to something that feels really good? And this is another aspect, I suppose, of what we're seeing in a lot of modern dis-ease. And I say it that way, for a particular reason. Disease. Wow, this is a really heavy word, right? This is you are diseased. It makes me even feel bad to say this word. But dis-ease actually keeps us in conversation with something, right? Something's just a little out of balance, or maybe even a lot out of balance, maybe grossly out of balance. But we're recognizing that we're still a participant in this thing. Right? We're not broken. We're not like, there's not something wrong. We don't have to return ourselves to sender. And I'm coming back around to the beautiful thing that you've just presented, but that is that, yes, not every situation is right for everybody. Yoga is not the right practice for everybody. Right? There are actually many lineages of yoga. We're being a little bit funneled in the modern world into the physical practice of yoga.
Very much so.
Yoga actually recognizes that we all have different characters, and there are different yoga practices that don't involve the physical body at all, actually, to help guide us back to this idea. But certainly our ability to recognize that something isn't really going well for us, or something doesn't feel good for us, is another aspect of being in creativity and being in presence, and just saying, you know what, there are so many things in our world. I don't need all of them. I don't need to be liked by everyone. I don't need to like everyone. I just need to have compassion for everything. I just need to have respect for everything. But I'm going to choose what serves my path the best. I'm going to choose what feeds me and nourishes me. And in turn, the thing is that sometimes when I say that, it feels a little selfish, right? Like, I'm going to choose what's good for me. But the thing is, when we choose what's good for us, then whatever we've chosen is getting in return is the fullness of what we have to offer as well. And again, it comes back to that idea of relationship, right? It's not ever just about us. And when we make it only about us is when we don't feel good. And so it's it's a little bit of a dance to bring that theme back in, right? I'm going to choose to listen to a type of music that feels really good. And what that does is it makes me feel calm and happy and present. And then when I engage with my family, that's what they're getting. Right? When I engage with my students, that's what they're getting. They're getting me from a place of integration.
So kind of where I'm jarring inside at the moment, which I would love to really open up even deeper, is yes, we're consistently in relationship. And yes, we're consistently, like, you have to be self-interested, even has negative connotations around it, but self-loving, right? So that you can fill up your own cup to be in relationship from the most whole and authentic place, right? But what's opening up for me then is that, and this is something that I'm already aware of, is that there is not just one me, because there's that relationship. Watch out now.
Guys, you're in trouble.
But you know what I mean? There's like multiple facets to the existence that is I, right? There is the observer that is observing the caricature that it like exists and lives out and has this conversation, right? And so even there again lies relationship. But I guess I'm kind of prefacing an answer that I was asking the question in terms of, yes, there is relationship, but then there is also self-interest, and they seem kind of at odds with each other.
Yeah.
Do they?
So the thing of it is, so I see what you're getting at. And for sure, I don't know if this is, I guess, living the vagabond life. I'm very deeply connected in a lot of ways, and in a lot of other ways, I feel a bit disconnected with I'm doing quotations with my fingers, with the modern, realm. But I know, like a decade ago, maybe even more, right? This whole self-help movement came, and from the beginning, I was a little bit at odds with some of the things that were being presented. Not that the foundation of the teachings wasn't sound, but what I felt like it was doing was encouraging people to like cocoon themselves, right? I am capable. I can do it for myself. I can, and I know the message is much more broad. So anyone who is still following this movement, please know that everything has a broad sense, but I'm just using one piece of it as an example. And the thing of it is when we look at these ancient philosophies, which are really my guides for so much of the work that I'm doing, again, back to obviously, probably you're hearing over and over again, these nature-based philosophies, right? Philosophies that look at the intelligence of life via the intelligence of nature and the natural balance of nature. And I mean, what are we sustained by? And even if we live in a penthouse in a city, right, you cannot deny that we are sustained by the earth. All of life is sustained by the earth. And in fact, all of these philosophies, what they say to us, what they offer to us is this consideration that every entity as a manifestation of life is a microcosm of this macrocosm of the universe, meaning that a human being, right, is in a way like a little earth. Every law that governs life for the earth is the same natural law that also governs us. And this would be on the biological level, but also spiritual, right? So, I think that, what is the word I'm looking for? I'm staring at the olive trees, looking for their wisdom. And I totally lost my words, but that's exactly it, right? We were talking before this started about this idea of going beyond words. I could feel what I want to say in my heart, and now I have to.
Well, what was coming up for me when you were sharing, just to bring it alignment, was, even in the Vedas, they figured out constellations and the distance between stars and like all this sort of stuff by mapping out the distances and the relationships in their own body.
Yeah.
So they'll look at the human body and going, okay, if this is this far away, then the sun must be this far away. And I'm like, wait, how did you even know to make that inference? Like, slow down, Rasta.
Yeah, but slow down, Rasta. Like, this is part of the point, is that It's, and not to say that there's anything wrong with velocity, because I know, brother, I've seen you work, you've got this pulse, this velocity, and this is your natural way. And it's so beautiful. But for someone like me, I have a more methodical kind of pace, well, anyway, but yes. And this is part of the point, is listening and observing, right? Is that so many times, and I feel like I'm starting to go in 50 million directions, but
I love it.
And I'm sorry for all the yoga teachers out there who have said this, but sometimes I have walked into, so one of my favorite things to do when I'm traveling to all these places in the world is I love to go to yoga studios and take classes from other people. One, just to keep a pulse on what the world of yoga is like. Right. Two, to keep a pulse on what is speaking to people, so that I can keep growing my voice as a teacher, as a facilitator. But more than once, right, I sit down in a yoga class and the teacher says, close your eyes. And, you close your eyes, and then they're like, okay, everything in the universe is inside of you. And okay, so for those of us who have maybe been walking one path or another, there's a really deep connection to this idea. But I'm going to say, for the general person, or if I could imagine my 18-year-old self, which is the first time I walked into a yoga class, sitting down in a yoga class and having someone say, close your eyes, the whole universe is within you. I'm like, what? What does that even mean? Right? But the thing about these ancient traditions, and the thing that just pinged me about what you said, is that these ancient people, let's say, were still living life in a way that was much more harmonious with natural law than we tend to be doing in our modern life. And not to say that anything about modern life is necessarily wrong. There are good things, it's the same. People ask me all the time, well, so you've negated modern medicine. I say, no, I worked in integrative medicine in Chicago for years and years, because there's a beauty to what modern medicine presents, right? And there's a beauty to the wisdom that traditional Chinese medicine also presents. And if you bring them together, again, we're in the realm of relationship, and you get kind of the best of the best. But the thing of it is that what we've lost a lot in life in modern times is this real ability to listen and observe. And the way that these wisdoms were created tens of thousands, when you're talking Vedic period, we're talking 10,000 years ago, which for my mind isn't even possible to conceptualize what 10,000 years ago means, but where that wisdom came from a person, right, listening to the inner workings of their body and understanding that they were in fact a microcosm of a macrocosm. And so that all of that understanding really can be found when we're willing to look at the honesty of what's going on with us, if that makes sense.
It does make sense.
It brings back to relationship. And I think that this is one of actually the fallacies about some of these, like in yoga, you hear it all the time, right? Take a deep dive into yourself. Okay. So this can mean so many things, but essentially what it's asking us to do is exactly what you just said. Can we listen honestly and understand with honesty the symphony that is us? It's not the symphony we think we want to be, not the symphony that people expect us to be, not the symphony, but can we really take the time and honesty to understand who we are in the totality of us, who we are as this really unique manifestation of life? And the place where we get stuck, I think, is that people feel like they have to isolate themselves in order to do that. But what we're missing, what a missing piece is in the way that we're bringing these teachings to modern life, is that the whole point of this is not to implode, is not to only be comfortable, right, in my own skin, is not to only understand who this Molly creature is in this life. But the promise or the faith piece of that is that when I am walking honestly as who I understand myself to be, that I can actually interact with the rest of the world with so much more creativity, with so much more abundance, with so much more inspiration. So in the end, even though we start by turning inward, the whole point is to turn outward with the exact same listening, intentness, honesty right, that we have offered to ourselves.
Yeah, so the rabbit hole of honesty is something I want to go down. I just want to flag one thing before we do, though, is this thing that you're referring to in terms of presence speaks really deeply to me, because I've really noticed, and I actually call it boredom, because there's a lot of people my age, like people like people that are struggling with creativity. The question I ask is, how often are you bored? And it's very rarely, because the smartphone's always one step away. The audiobook's on file. There's 2 podcasts running. There's the album running at the same time. Blah 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 blah. Everything's there, and I totally get it, because I've lived in that state, right? But the question that always arrives to me is like, okay, how do you expect something new to come in when you haven't created space or bandwidth for that new thing to come in, right? So like, how can you be present? Like when you're saying presence to me, it's like, because presence for a millennial can be quite boring. Yeah, it can be like, I'm just present. Like I'm just present to what is, like sure. That's the biggest challenge I have with my meditation clients, is like, I'm sitting there and they're like, it's really boring, or my mind is like chaotic. And I'm like, of course it's chaotic. Yeah, of course it's chaotic. Like it's been like, you've never stopped to reflect on it for like any given moments of time. And of course it's going to be like consistently flicking through files as it normally does. But now you're watching it flick through files and you're like, whoa, what the fuck is going on? If you just let it do its thing, you over time, it'll be like, oh wow, okay, let me just settle, But the whole essence of like how presence and boredom can then spark creativity when you've given it some space and some bandwidth, I think is a really deep conversation that you're having. But I think even deeper than that now, it's what you're scratching on is honesty. And I think that touches on something, and it's something really personal for me, because when I was diagnosed with depression a while ago, the thread that the psychiatrist basically pulled out was like, if you could just adopt honesty, you'll be sweet. And I was like, whoa, okay. And she literally like just opened the gaping hole of like the wound that was there, and from there everything sort of had to start to heal. But honesty is a really deep concept. But it's like, even when I look at society, it's not ever present, it's more rarefied than it is commonplace. Is this your understanding of it too?
Yeah, sure. And I guess it's the other kind of rabbit hole of connection, isn't it? And I guess it's a funny way of bringing full circle. So for one piece, I just want to backtrack for a second, and all that we were just talking about this kind of internal personal inquiry, right? Being at odds with this expansiveness, creation, connection, and obviously, hopefully, the listeners kind of followed that reconnection of that. The whole point of turning inside is to sprout back out into the outside in a more integrated way, and so they're actually not at odds at all, right? But the human tendency, and here we get into another deep aspect of some of these ancient practices, meditation, right, is that our mind, whether, when you talk about creativity, like think about your mind, it is one of the most creative entities ever to exist. But the problem is that in its extreme creativity, it has the tendency to create stories that aren't true. And this is kind of the essence of a lot of these teachings, is giving us a tool to understand what we've created in our mind that is just a story about something that actually isn't really the reality. But like you said, it's a very tender, and when we start to use so many words also,
communication can tend to break down when you're talking about something so deep. Yeah.
But the thing is that at the end of the day, what we really want is we want to feel seen and heard. But in the mind's sort of tendency to be a little bit, right, like we call it the monkey mind in yoga, and it really is like, just going all over the place. Right, we are so the honesty of living your own symphony is one thing, but then we're never out of relationship with life, right? So say I meet a man, and I'm really interested in this man, and I'm falling in love with this man, but this man has priorities in life that are different than mine. And so maybe I begin to change my behavior right? To still be recognized by him as what I perceive to be important or worthwhile, right? So in a way, I've abandoned my own honesty to be seen and heard by this person who I'm giving power to. And this is also I'm not sure why I'm using this as an example, because this is a whole nother rabbit hole when we get into relationships, but it's one that I think everyone can feel, right? Mm-hmm. Who of us has not ever entered into a relationship, whether it be a friendship, whether it be with our family, whether it be with a lover, right? Where we've sort of shifted away slightly from something we really believe in because we want to be recognized so badly by that person as being worthy.
Yeah, I've seen some stand-up comedians,
right? Do you see what?
And they'll say, like, whenever you're going out on a first date, you're never actually meeting that person. You're meeting that person's ambassador. It's like, well, Amrit's great. Like, Amrit's fantastic. Have you met Amrit? Oh my God, Amrit, what a fantastic bloke. And then, and then only after a couple of days you really meet Amrit, and it's like, oh, what was all that fanfare about? But this is where, God, I love that. Oh my God, I think I'm going to use that. That is a wonderful metaphor. Molly's ambassador has shown up for this. Yeah, but the other piece that you mentioned is this idea of space, right? And what you and I did before we even started this conversation is we closed our eyes together and we took a deep breath. And this, even though it seems really simple, it's something that comes back to me over and over again, right? Is these moments where we can just pause, breathe, and remember what it is that we understand to be true about ourselves in any given moment. And the tricky part about this is that we're always changing who I am today. If I reflect on my 20-year-old self, when I was 20, I thought I knew a lot. And now as a 40-year-old, I reflect and I'm like, oh, for goodness sakes, I didn't know anything. Oh my gosh, I know so much more now. So I have two choices, right? I can judge that 20-year-old for not having known. I can judge my 35-year-old self for having made a particular decision, or I can arrive here and now and say, okay, with all of this experience, with all of the digestion, of all of these things, this is where I arrive. This is what I understand to be true about myself. And I'm just going to take each step in that truth. And the thing of it is, right, is that when we give ourselves, and it can be as simple as making a space to take a deep breath before we answer someone, take a deep breath before we choose how to interact. It gives us one kind of space to stay true to what we know to be true in any given moment. And I'm really specific about saying it that way because I love that.
Hopefully in life, we're always learning, right? You're inspired evolution. I'm inspiration heal. So this word inspiration to me is staying connected with curiosity. And curiosity is something that we, like, when we fall into the dis-ease of boredom, we've just lost track of our curiosity. And we're so entertained in the modern world. We have so much information coming at us all the time that it's actually hard. For anyone out there who's been in a yoga class before, any kind of meditative class, right? There's always a moment in the asana practice and the physical yoga practice. Usually, traditionally, we end the practice with shavasana, laying down on the back. And for many people, it's the only time they're still in the entire day. For other people, it is the most excruciating moment of the day because they have to be with themselves in honesty. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to say. There's nothing to respond to. There's nothing, right? In that moment, we're really just inviting ourselves to be with ourselves in the greatest honesty we can. But this speaks to the other side of it. And I'm sorry, I see your mind working. I see your eyes going. So let me just say one more thing about this. Yeah, about this like idea of
the beard hides nothing.
And that is that the idea of creating space is really sexy to people, right? Like, yes, I want to create space. I love this idea. I love this. It's something people are selling right now. Like, I think there's a book about it, create space in 30 days, create space. The thing is
the whole
that
minimalist movement. Yeah.
Yeah. But listen, over the years that I was practicing medicine in Chicago, one of the most shocking experiences for me was that when I would facilitate this creation of space for people, it ended up being really scary for them. Because what we tend to do is fill space to not engage with honesty, because we have bought into all of the stories, expectations, things that we've hoped for, like all of these stories that actually aren't true, but they make us feel worthy in life, even though we don't end up feeling worthy in life, right? And then you take some and you take some of that away, and there's then this hope. And the beauty of this, as you were just speaking to, is that it gives space. It is a place of invitation for something new.
But it's fragile too, eh?
It's the scary thing is that space is actually a space of responsibility. Because you then become responsible for consciously choosing what to put in that space. And if, you have fallen into the modern way of life where we're so full, we don't even understand what the heck we want or we need, that space, the invitation of that space is like, oh my God, okay, what do I do with this now? I don't know what I want. I don't know who I am. I don't know, right? And so there's this beautiful duality. And that's why for me, things like yoga, things like a meditative practice, things like any kind of even daily ritual that helps to keep us on track of what direction we believe we want to go, they're like light, like a beacon of light in the darkness of the unknown. All of life in some way is unknown, but that's what's known. and that's where creation is born from, right? Is these spaces, but it's really beautiful when we have a hand to hold, a ritual to do, a practice to do that helps us to feel a little bit more comfortable with creating these spaces with which we can then begin to invite more honesty into our lives.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And something that was really present for me as you were sharing that when you saw the cogs kind of ticking was I had to do some work in regards to this, because a big part of me feels that, maybe because I'm Indian and that whole conversation around Maya and illusion, right, is that reality is completely subjective. Right. And I often entertain this, is that I really love, the conversations we've been having around perspective and the importance of them and how they interact with choice and creativity. I think that's a really yummy nexus to have this conversation around. That's kind of what the nucleus I'm feeling of this chat has been about so far. But in and around that, the idea around reality is like that perspective thing, that reality is completely subjective. That was a bit of a rabbit hole. Like I opened up way too much space, like as you articulated in that, because it was like, whoa, okay. And exactly what you're thinking, like, what are you going to be responsible for then, And in that, like, having a completely subjective reality, a lot of things started dropping in. Like I started questioning a lot because there's a lot of space to ask a lot of questions. It's like, okay, I can write the script to some degree. Right? Yes, there are the laws of biology and physics and all of that. But in terms of like belief systems and all this sort of stuff, and I started really reading up on a lot of things. Some things didn't serve me. And I never talk about this sort of stuff because they don't serve anybody, and I don't like introducing stuff that doesn't serve you. But I started reading into like, okay, one example which didn't serve me was, okay, where does money come from? Yeah, and I started reading into this, and it was like, it's a really gross example, right? Like a matter example by gross example, I mean. And it was like, okay, so they're just units of money. They used to be backed by a material mineral, and then it's like, okay, they're not even backed by that anymore, and they're just someone just presses play on a computer screen, and they control artificially how much there is running around. And as soon as I started wrapping into that, and I was like, oh, that doesn't feel good. Like that piece of information, like I'm so much more aware, but I'm not sitting like in any sort of empowerment knowing that. Now I'm just like angry at an external thing that does not serve me. And so that gives an example of like, oh, but I'm still responsible for that space that I created inside me. I'm responsible for that information that I filled myself with. And in that point, I'm like asking myself really deeply, like, okay, something's come in and I'm not really sure it's serving me. It is important that I know this, and some part of me, but where do I move forward? And what I have come to learn, and this is segueing back to what you were saying about honesty. And I'm hoping we just have a chat about this. Like what really dropped in for me was, and this sounds really pagan, but basically just earth. fire, wind, and water. And it really just came back to that on a really basic level. It's like, what is my relationship with the earth, the home that I live in, my heart, like the earth? Like, what is my relationship with fire? Like, how are my passions going? What is my relationship with the sun? Like, how do I feel like inspired? What is my relationship with the water that I'm actually drinking? I'm 70% water. Am I moving? You know, like, how's that all going? What is my breathing practice like? You know, like, am I breathing well? Am I restricted? Am I condensed? Or am I like actually open? Am I breathing well? And these were the only 4 real things that I could tangibly say, okay, these are 4 things that feel true, feel honest, and actually have my back. And I'm happy to dedicate myself to them on the journey of like, these 4 things are like my honest truth. Everything else kind of continues to be in that subjective realm, if I may say so.
Sure. And this is so beautiful because in a way, Amrit, you've just sort of brought us full circle back to this idea, really of these nature-based philosophies, right? And again, to this sort of concept that we are a microcosm of the macrocosm. And all of these different philosophies and teachings that I follow, that I share, as I've mentioned now many times in this sweet chat that we're having, are nature-based philosophies, meaning that there is this belief and understanding that there is a natural law, that everything within the universe is governed by. And yes, the way that our mind has evolved, the way that the vibration of what we call mind has evolved to a place where it is actually able to create things that don't actually exist, which is really an interesting, if you look at
phenomenon,
it's a really interesting phenomenon. There's a very interesting provocative book called Sapiens. I don't know if you've read it.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Right? So one of the things that Yuval presents in that book is that one of the things that differentiated our species from other species like ours was, and they're not even exactly sure, what the shift was that we went from people who lived life according to what was present, like you're saying, right? I don't feel well because I don't have enough metabolism going in my body. I don't feel well because I'm not, moving fluidly like the nature of water. And this is something beautiful in traditional Chinese medicine, which is the foundation of my medical education, is that from the original vibrations of life, like one of the next ways of defining life is through the elements. And every diagnosis we make in traditional Chinese medicine has some essence of how the elemental factors of us are either cooperating together or no. Right. And so the very foundation of the medicine and every aspect of healing is really trying to understand how these elemental factors are maybe out of balance, which is making us feel not good. And so, you coming to that on your own is quite amazing and quite extraordinary. And that's what all of these different practices are leading us back to. But that really, and it's why I love choosing places like Patagonia to take people, right? Like, take off your shoes, stand on the earth, stand in the middle of a place where we don't have a cell signal, and just observe how things are working. Come back to how the breeze feels on your skin, and what that does for your inspiration, what that does for your breath, right? What the cool water flowing across your hand feels like when we're rafting, because we are the elements. This physical capsule that I am walking this life in is made of elements. It's made of the elements of the earth. No one can deny this. Everything from carbon to the rest of, all of the elements. This is how we're all governed. And when we move back to an understanding of how nature loves to move, and we begin to be present to how we are either moving in harmony with that or not, which is usually when we start to feel not good, right? It's such a beautiful, simple way to return to presence, to return to creating spaces that then we can fill with something that is harmonious with the honesty of that, rather than filling spaces with creations that may or may not serve us in our lives.
There's a question that keeps coming up for me, which is, are we whole the way we are because we're perfectly cracked open to be right. I totally agree with that, right?
I'm sorry, I don't even let you finish your question.
Well, see, I totally agree with that. But then on the other side of the equation, there's somehow still space for healing.
Yeah. And that's because life is movement. If the very foundation of life is, I work with this gorgeous man. He is a Buddhist scholar in Nepal. When I take my groups to Nepal, and I always take them to have discourses with him. And last year he said something so simple and so brilliant. And he said, guys, have you ever thought about the fact that we're called human beings, not human feet? I'm not a human bee. I'm a human being, which means that there's action in the essence of my life, right? And in fact,
yes,
right? And one of the very
all that vitality. Oh my God, sorry.
So there is nothing. The very nature of life is movement. The very foundation of life is vibration. And so where we get stuck when we feel not whole, when we feel like there's not space, it's because we've matriculated to a place where we've attached ourselves to an idea and we've closed the doors to that there can be other ideas. So we actually stop the flow of life in some way, whether it's with our mind, whether it's with our spirit, or whether it's with our physical body. And that's why I love movement so much, is because sometimes it's tricky working with the mind. Sometimes it's tricky to try to parse out, what are my thought patterns that aren't serving me? Okay, but if I go and I move my body actually guides me toward the understanding of that without ever needing to put words. And this is just a side note. But the idea is that everything in life comes and goes. Everything in life is created, matures, and disintegrates. This is the very foundation of life. Look to nature. I mean, the seasons are one of the most beautiful guides that we have when you look to nature, right? Spring is so beautiful. Why? The birds are chirping. The sun is getting warm. The buds are blossoming on the trees. And then summer comes and it's also beautiful because the fruit is growing on the trees and we have yummy things to eat. And then fall comes and it's also beautiful because the leaves have come through their life cycle. They're turning colors as they're about to fall to the ground to become fertilizer for the next year's buds. But you don't see the tree trying to stop any of this, right? Because this is the power of life. And this is actually also the power of transformation and the power actually of, in my mind, creativity is allowing things to come and go in their natural way. And a really deep root of this thing that we've been talking about, honesty, is like even a relationship, right? The most beautiful marriage will come and go. Either the marriage goes before the life goes, or the life goes before the marriage goes, right? But the very nature of life is that everything will come and go. And when we allow this to happen in the natural way, not only is there always space for new creation, not only is there always fertile soil, right, from the leaves that have fallen from our prior experience that fertilize the wisdom from which we grow new ideas, but we never get stuck because we honor that this is the nature of life. We honor that life, we are human beings. We are being, we are not be.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you just say that, if you're at home listening to this podcast, like say the word being and then say the word be.
Yeah, right?
Like
vitality in it.
Vitality, the difference.
Yeah. It's amazing. So what's coming up with for me is I'd love to just share like something that's really deep and really present for me, if that's okay. I know this is me interviewing you, but here I am sharing.
I love it. Yeah.
But one of my deepest fundamental philosophies that I lean in on is that we are the universe looking in on ourselves, right? And that is like, and around everything, I kind of see myself again and again, like, yes, there's a lot of things that we discuss around purpose, but it always comes back to me that I'm a health coach, And it's just like but we talk mostly about purpose and direction. And it's like, yeah, because through all my findings, like I've come to find that your health and your purpose are the same thing. You know, like if your life is stressed, it's asking you to recalibrate your purpose. That stress is indicator of like, hey, just realign and you'll find yourself healthy again, you know. And if you're generally healthy, it's because you're on purpose. It's kind of what I found. But in that, the core of that is basically that we are the universe looking in on ourselves. There is this innate curiosity then that is impregnated to the fabric that is the universe, right? Because why is it looking in on itself? Like, why is this created in such a way that I over here have this experience that is I, you know, and you have an experience over there that is you, you know, but you call that I and I call this I. And somehow there's these two eyes looking at each other, right? Having this dance. But there is this essence of curiosity that is infallible in that, right? And this deep, like, I've put pen to paper on a book, right? And I've started writing, and it is taking way longer than I ever imagined it would, right? But it's legitimately the work is called Vitality, right? And the way I see it is, you know, the curiosity is so fundamental that I actually think we age, like, is what's sitting for me now, is like we get older and we start to age and wither, right? Because we lose curiosity, because we're no longer serving that impregnated, infallible concept that the design was based upon. As you get older, you can't help but understand that, oh, this falls because of gravity, you know. But when you're a kid, it was like, wow, like, you know, things fall. And space, things don't fall, you know. And it's like, oh, that's a vacuum. And the more you learn, the more intelligent you get. But I fundamentally believe, because the next generation, they're like plugged into a whole new sense of reality. And that is the iteration on curiosity. And that was what makes them so vital. And with the grace, you know, obviously you've got to let go of your paradigm and the world that you occupied and as you existed as you transition, right? But that curiosity is so fundamental. That was just something I wanted to share that like really burns deeply inside me.
No, I love it. And curiosity for me is such a key point to happiness. And to me, it gets back to our original conversation about creativity and sort of my own connection with this idea of being able to see any given moment, any given situation, any given decision from an infinite number of perspectives. And as you talk about this aging process, right, of us maturing and maybe becoming a little bit more decrepit and less vital, you know, some of that vitality is lost is because over the course of time, for whatever reason, we lose touch with that curiosity. We lose touch with, in any given moment, saying, you know, I've chosen this. And it's kind of the quintessential, like, old crotchety person, right? You like that, like they have their way, they have their way of doing things, they have their way of thinking, they have their way of, right? And what is this all? This is all just attachment to what they've decided.
Is it terrible that I've got the inspired evolution, but I see myself being that way?
Well, the thing is that it's a really natural tendency of the mind. But again, no, it's not, because you're human. And that's why we even have conversations like this, to keep ourselves curious. I mean, you and I are engaging with one another to share ideas, to keep our curiosity alive. That's the whole point of this relationship in this moment, right? It's so beautiful. All of us have that thought, like, oh my God, I'm going to become that really nasty old woman, you know, crouching, like, maybe, but hopefully not.
It's just going to be me and my dog.
Yeah. And it gets back to me I mean, it brings me back to something that I have found in all of my explorations to be so important. And that is, and here I'll like quote another just beautiful, I went to a traditional Chinese medical symposium. I go every year to just stay in touch with my colleagues. And one of these guys, he's written many books, translated so many traditional Chinese medicine texts. And he's giving this like lecture on the spirituality of the acupuncture points and Taoism. And I'm completely like engrossed, because this is the stuff, you know, like I know you do. I eat it up. I love it.
Yeah.
And every so often he would be like, I know I'm right, but maybe I'm not. I know I'm right about this, but maybe I'm not. And I was so incredibly touched, because not only did it speak to his humility as a master, right? Because this guy is a master. He has every right to be like, this is the truth. And, you know, this is what everyone should believe. And yet still, in all of the wisdom and all of the discovery that he's had, what he's saying is, from my experience in life so far, this is what I understand to be the truth. And I'm aware that I could learn something else that might change my perception of this truth. And it was one of the most beautiful things that I have ever heard. And what is this? This is curiosity, right? This is curiosity. And, you know, I am looking into the universe that is me, and I am making decisions about what to wear, how to present myself, who I am in this world. But where I fall into dis-ease is when I stop considering that I always have a choice. It's when I stop considering that, and one example that I love to use is, because it's easy when we feel good to think about these things. The hard part, right, is when we're in moments of stress, when we're in moments of depression, when we're in, absolutely. And one of these ideas of relationship as it's presented by yoga, Buddhism is that life isn't really about the thing. Life is how we choose to interact with the thing. And that includes our own thoughts. But like an example of this would be, you know, I go, let me think of a fun one. Maybe I can't think of a fun one now. Is, you know, maybe I'm hoping that I go to the store to buy my favorite food for dinner. And, you know, I get in my car, I drive to the store, I drive 5 extra miles because there's only one store in town that has my favorite frozen dinner. I don't actually eat frozen dinners. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just using it as an example. And, you know, and I get to the store and I walk down the aisle and I look down and lo and behold, it's sold out.
Yeah.
Shit. Can I say that on a podcast?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want to say.
Okay.
Free media.
so, right. So in that moment, there's this thing. There's this thing that I made this effort to go and get something that I really love, that I know I'm going to enjoy. I've probably fantasized about how well my whole evening's going to go because I'm going to have my favorite food. And then the actual moment is that it's not available. So in that moment, I can get angry. I can get frustrated. I can get mad. I can get stuck. Or I can say, oh, isn't that interesting? So what is another thing that I really love to eat? And can I find it here? And can I, right? And it's such a silly example, I know.
No, it's a solid one.
But
I think with my stomach first, beyond all things. So this is a very poignant, there's a reason you chose that one.
Yes, I'm thinking about breakfast now. But you're thinking about dinner probably. But, you know, these are, and this kind of, you know, brings like in this beautiful package, in a way, all of these beautiful concepts that have bubbled up for us in this conversation, the idea of presence, the idea of creativity, the idea of honesty, right? There's nothing I can do in that moment to make that thing appear. Right? There's nothing that I can do to change the honesty of that. Yeah. But what I can change is, you know, or what I do have control over is how I relate to what I find.
Yeah. And to be honest, like what you're sharing has been a really, like you've shared something really simple, admittedly. And the thing that I like about that has actually been one of the key metrics that I have consistently looked in on to sort of see how well I am tracking with the work that I've been doing on myself, right? And it's not just about food, even though many times it can be, but it's like, it's legitimately what I call the bounce back factor, right? And it's just what I call it to myself. I don't articulate it to anybody else like that, but now you all know the inner workings of Amrit's mind. But it's the bounce back factor. So yesterday I was actually still on the food topic. I was getting food and I was grabbing like the self-serve. So I just grabbed myself a pakora and I was going to put some sauce on it, right? Amazing sauce. But anyway, I digress. And so I'm putting the sauce on it and this gentleman's just like reached in and actually just like moved my hand almost to the point where I've had to rescue my bowl with the pakora and the sauce in it. Now, it wasn't unintentional. It was like the gentleman was going out of his way to be rude, right? Oh. Yeah. And so in this point, I'm holding the bowl and I'm like, oh, pardon me, but my arm's there. Yeah. And he goes, yeah, that's all right. And I was just like, okay. I was like, okay, well, now that it's flagged, that's cool. Now I felt all the palpitations of what testosterone does to you, right? Like I felt every single part of me like that went, okay, this bowl could very much like end up in your face, but like I felt
Fight
all
or
the,
flight, fight or
I felt,
flight.
I felt every physical sensation doing that, but I could watch my mind and my mind just smiled. It was like, this is a great interaction, Yeah. And then I moved on. Yeah. And so that was really profound for me because I use this again and again. Like it happens, I'm on the tram and someone brushes past you way too hard because you're in their way, right? Not because you're intending to be in their way. It's packed, right? The train's packed, but someone's going to move out and someone's not so happy about they're having a shit day. So these interactions consistently happen, but how much do you let them throw you off and then bounce back? Like that work on myself, I often like use that bounce back factor in terms of, oh wait, that mindfulness stuff, it's actually really working because like I remember how quickly things used to stick. Like someone brushed me in like too hard and I'm like, what an asshole. And that has the propensity to ruin your whole day at 6:30 in the morning, But the reality is with the work that you do on yourself, all of a sudden it's like, well, actually no, like that was just a moment. That person's probably having a shit day. I hope your day gets better, mate.
Bravo.
So I've been using that a lot. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And it's so, it's so beautiful, your example, and it brings it more to a kind of emotional guttural level. My example was maybe about the saliva and yours was really about the, the heart, the spirit, right? When things challenge us really at the core. And two things really come up for me in that way. And that is that one thing really pervasive in my life, in my practice, in what I challenge myself to do is to really walk the walk. And this gets back a little bit to how we started, right? This idea is like, does what I'm creating need to be grandiose? Does what I'm creating always need to be something huge that's affecting thousands of people? Or is it that I can really be the embodiment of what I believe in any moment, no matter what life brings to me, right? And the beautiful example that you've just given of, okay, so, right, I can either get angry back at this person, I can buy into their vibration, the vibration they're choosing to have, or I can do my best to take a deep breath, be present in who I want to be, and, still allow them to be the honesty that they're understanding in life, but not dive into the hole with them, right? To continue to walk the walk according to how I'm choosing to walk the walk. And the other part of that story that's so beautiful, that touches me, is it also kind of speaks about space, this idea of space that we were talking about, and the responsibility that we have. And it's like, if you had interacted with that person at his vibration, you would have fed his fire. But being conscientious and choosing to say, gosh, maybe he's just having a really bad day, right? Keeps his responsibility in his court and keeps your responsibility in yours. Meaning you can have compassion for the person, but you don't have to feed the fire that they're creating. And this is another level of relationship, right? Can I be the witness? Can I be the holder? And I was just in a music circle this weekend, and it was one of the really beautiful things that sort of presented itself to me as I was sitting with this group of incredibly diverse people. And as we're singing and raising our voices together, inevitably people have different emotions, they have different feelings, they have different experiences. And when when you share after an experience like this, I mean, it's so incredible, the diversity of you're all doing the same thing, you're all just singing the same songs, you're all in the same space, and that every individual is having such a unique experience. And the beauty of having these types of experiences, at least for me, is it brings to light that we can be individuals together. We don't have to try to be each other. We don't have to try to emulate anything other than what we are, right? It is really possible to allow each human being to be the complete whole entity that they are. Even if it's different from what we are, we can still walk the path together. And this is what your example really speaks to me, I suppose. Like, can we not only allow but celebrate right? The incredible diversity of our experiences in life. And can we stay away from judgment? Can we stay away from storytelling about what other people might be going through? Can we maintain the confidence in what we've chosen and also celebrate what the person next to us has chosen?
Yeah.
And obviously there are fine lines here, right? We as a society decide what is right, what is wrong, what is right. We have to make some of these designations to live in peace together. But on a spiritual level, which is, I think, more where this conversation is going, on an individual level, on this level of discovery, and this is really part of honesty. And again, the fertile soil from where creativity really comes. Can we just make good choices and allow and celebrate all the good choices everyone else is making too?
So I feel like I can talk to you forever. And I'm so glad that we're so deeply connected, because we can talk forever. But I'm also, one question that's coming up for me that is still super deep is what is at the moment, at the next, like at the tip of the arrowhead of your curiosities?
So, wow, that's a wonderful question. What is at the tip of the arrowhead of my curiosities? Well, I suppose, as I mentioned earlier, life has this funny way. I don't really believe that anything that comes to us in life is random. I really believe that what our mind is thinking is how then life relates back to us. So even though what I'm going to say to you is this path of vagabond is not really something I conscientiously chose, but obviously subconsciously I didn't choose it because I've created it. But as I mentioned earlier, I suppose it's amazing to me how integrated life is when we allow it to be. So when I was practicing medicine in Chicago, I remember I used to joke with my patients. They would be like, "Oh, you're such a good healer. You're such a good doctor." And I'd be like, I'm actually not. I just study humans. This is my job. I know that I'm administering medicine. I know I'm giving you treatments, but what I really feel like my profession is studying humans. And segue to today, where I'm not actively practicing medicine, but instead I'm creating these experiences for people. And, and the joke is on me because every week I'm with a different group of people. Sometimes every week I'm with a different yoga teacher, right? So, studying humanity is for sure my full-time job right now. So at the tip of the arrowhead of my curiosity is still really, what is this beautiful connectivity that we feel so far away from, but that from my perspective is so pervasive and so present? And how is it that I can continue creating, either by experience or by teaching or by, whatever it is that I'm creating, ways for people to reconnect with this connectivity, with this through line of life that, in modern life, and I was born in America, and so I don't say this with an air of judgment, but definitely as I'm traveling around the world, one of the interesting things to me about America is it's a very young country. Right. And all of us know that it's an immigrant country. Like there's no, the native peoples. Okay. And I don't want to get into that conversation because that's a very heated and emotional discussion about the origin. But talking about modern America, when I go back to the country where I was born now, what I feel like I see and I witness has a huge generality, of course, is this desperate desire for roots. And it's so interesting, right? Because the whole country was born in its modern way from immigrants, from people that left their roots, left their ancestors, left those traditions to
looking for opportunity.
Life, right? And this is, I think, why also the capitalism of yoga has become so strong, is because what yoga communities are doing right now in the United States, I'm sure around the world, is they are creating these beacons of light where people can come and feel connected to
surf communities without the beaches. You can have them inland.
Right. exactly. This is exactly this. So at the tip of the arrow of my curiosities is really this continued discovery of how can I continue to facilitate this regrounding of humanity. And that sounds grandiose. And even when I say it, my heart kind of skips a beat, like, who am I to even be, thinking about this? Who am I to think that I can even create it or hold the wisdom to be able to even consider creating? But as I have been gifted this opportunity to witness such an immensity of humanity across all cultures, across all countries, across all types of groupings of people. For me, this is what I see as the deepest need right now in the world is this return to the simplicity of nature, is this return to the simplicity of understanding that everyone truly is whole as they are, and that comes in the form of an immense diversity, and that diversity is actually a celebration of life, not something to be subdued.
Feeling into that. Retreats in Patagonia.
Yeah.
February, end of Feb and end of March. End of Feb is North Chile, Patagonia, and end of March is South Chilean Patagonia. The space you're holding to reconnect, to connect. Oh, like I'm in complete. I want to come.
Brother, you're always welcome. You know this. You don't even need to ask.
Such an honor. And I'm just really, really, I do have a couple more questions, but I really just want to take this moment because I'm just bursting at the seams with it. Just really deep gratitude for your walk and like how you're showing up in the work you're doing with the world and the honest and pure and clean intentions behind it. It just, it like speaks volumes, I was just how long we've been on this chat, there's just so much goodness in it. I'm just really, really grateful for that. And I'm still got questions. And I'm
it's
just
only 10 minutes we've been talking.
7, calm down. And I just really want to, I really want to thank you for just your time and your energy and your presence today, but I know the walk, and you've been walking it longer than I have, and it's just such a humbling experience to sit and be able to share and just receive and learn so much in this space. I'm really, really, really grateful for your time and energy here today. Yeah.
I am very grateful for yours.
So. Yeah, go on.
It's okay. We get lost in a moment of appreciation between brother and sister. So
I was going to ask you, so I know you would there is that humility and that, who am I to step with the grandiosity of the vision that exists, right? But at the same time, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? And I know for myself, like the vision of the inspired evolution obviously is but then it's like showing up in the day-to-day, connecting to those things that we talked about, earth, fire, wind, and water, and my loved ones, and their relationship with these elements as well. But let's talk for just a quick second before we tie everything out is what is about the romance of immensity that, and I know simplicity has its own romance, but there is some sort of romance in immensity as well that draws us into inspiration.
Yeah. So, the immensity for me is really this connection that we've been alluding to and then talking more directly about, right? When I think about a project or a voice or a creation that reaches, let's just be really grandiose here, like imagine creating something that would really touch all of humanity. And then what you've really done is you've tapped into something that's very true in that wisdom of what connects us all. And so for me, this is the romanticized vision is sort of the feedback from the world that yes, what it is that you are putting out in the world is honest enough and learned enough. I'm going to use learned because I think that's probably the best word, right? That every human can feel connected to it. And it's like that beautiful spider web of connectivity that somehow our minds, want to sort of navigate us away from, but our hearts already know is there, right? We're just obscuring it. And I suppose what this beautiful question brings up for me as well, though, is sort of another perspective that has arrived for me in these, specifically in these last 2 years of my work. And particularly because there is this, in the yoga world, at least right now, there definitely is this idea of stardom that has been born.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I don't feel very comfortable with this because I feel like, I feel like this sort of need to be recognized as a teacher, as it's being done right now in some circles, kind of moves against the natural law, kind of moves against these beautiful natural elemental tendencies. Not to say, as I said before, someone's listening to the podcast and they're like, but you said everyone wants to be seen and heard. Of course, right? It's beautiful to be recognized by you as someone special. Hopefully it's beautiful for you to be recognized by me as someone special. So this isn't the level that I'm talking about. But so I've been teaching yoga teacher trainings for the last 5 years. And one of my fantasies that has been born in these last 2 years is, actually one of completely ungrandiose nature, which is my dream would be that there is a really solid yoga, I'm using yoga studio, but you can insert whatever it is that nature center or national park or whatever, right? That every human being within a very easy journey, whether it's 20 steps, whether it's a bicycle ride, right? That there would be these millions of beacons of light around the world that are accessible places of gathering for people to come and share ideas like you and I are doing, to return to intention, to learn tools to help them to draw back in the direction of honesty, and draw back in the connection of connectivity. So it's a little bit opposite of grandiose, but to me, in a way, it is like, can we take on that role of grandiose as a population together, rather than it being just a select few people who are trying to shine the light for everyone, right? Can I train people who want to be yoga teachers to be outstanding sharers of this wisdom that go back into their communities and create community programs, create classes that are accessible to all, that become beacons of light also, so that little by little the whole world is populated by people creating these things that are in harmony with nature, with truth, with honesty, right? So that we share the responsibility of creating.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. What really dropped in really deeply was that immensity and simplicity are actually not at odds. For example, just the breath and the sun. Yeah.
I don't think anyone out there listening hasn't had that experience of like turning their face to the spring sun, and taking a deep breath in, and how medicinal that is, how healing that is, how quickly and profoundly that roots you back into life.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, sister. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. I wish I could squeeze
virtual hugs. Damn it, they're not the same. They're not the same. This is that connection stuff we're talking about. So for those tuning in, I will put the dates to the retreats in the show notes and all that sort of stuff so you can follow in. Molly has a website, inspirationheals.com. definitely worth checking out. Great place to connect. For those that want to tune in and connect with you directly, Molly, is Facebook the best place? It's where I communicate with you. I'm not sure if I should be advertising
Facebook,
that.
Instagram, or through the website. My email is there. So
Awesome.
Any of those lines of communication, and then we'll segue into the right river.
Awesome. And I'm like, I don't want to speak for her, but my honest truth is connection is my highest value, and we are so close that I know I can speak for her. Just connect. Yeah. Like, there is so much, like, yeah, I'm just in awe of, like, this was a quick hour and a half, 7-minute podcast with the intention of going forward. And like, it was just, couldn't help but go deeper and deeper down the rabbit holes. And I still feel like we've only just scratched the surface of where we could really go. Retreats sound epic and amazing. And again, with the humility with which you hold them, I know that you're actually taking them to people to interact with these amazing, amazing experiences with nature, with wisdom, hard backed by science. Like, I'm in awe of your work. So it's been a real treasure and a real pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much. You know that I'm absolutely in awe of all that you're putting out in the world. You in a way, what you are doing is weaving a tapestry of connection where people can feel their humanity, where people find the courage and curiosity to find their voice. And this is so important, but it's also just reflection of how loving and beautiful a creature you are. So thank you so much for inviting me into your space today.
Thank you for your blessings. I've got one last little itty bitty question before we die.
Oh
no! I know. I can't be helped. Somebody just turn him off. Turn him off. Wait,
where's the button?
There's no button. I'm not wearing a bindi. That was totally inappropriate, but I went there. You heard it live on Inspired Evolution. I'm standing right behind that one. That's my own joke. How do you blow up an Indian? Press the red dot on the forehead. Oh my God, you can't say that. I just did. And on that note,
I think that's a great place to end. Bringing humor back into it.
On that note, beyond the name, beyond the yoga, Molly Cofman, this is metaphysical in its essence. Who are you?
Honestly, the first thing that my gut says is I am love.
Yeah, it does.
and the second thing that begins to bubble from the surface after that is really just someone who loves life and feels and sees and experiences so much beauty. And I don't mean that flippantly, because certainly I have had a lot of challenges and stops and stutters and holes and trips and injuries and everything else to navigate as we all do. But even within those, little by little, what life is gifting me is understanding the beauty even in those moments. And I just want to share.
And you do it with such grace and eloquence, sister. Oh, big love.
Big love to you.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Love of the Inspired Evolution and sharing the Love of the Inspired Evolution. If you feel like this content has supported you or may support anyone else that you know may resonate with the content of it, please share away and share the love around. Thank you guys so much. And to stay up to date on whatever's coming out with the Inspired Evolution, please subscribe. There's all these links in the bio for you to tune into the episodes and all these different platforms, just so the message can get to you and your loved ones. Thank you so much for all your love and support. Stay inspired to evolve.